Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. We would like to welcome you all to the first in a series of webinars following the release of our report, Understanding the Potential of Licensing Frameworks and Teams to Tackle Modern Slavery. I am pleased to share that the full report is now available on the Shiva Foundation website for download. So if you haven't already downloaded it and completely finished reading the whole thing, please do go to the website and download it. My name is Dami, Senior Program Manager at Shiva Foundation, and I've been involved in this project from the very beginning, so quite early on. And this report really builds on Shiva Foundation's experience coordinating the Hertfordshire Modern Slavery Partnership and the 2022 Self-Assessment Scorecard and Supporting Guidance for local authorities, which really helps local authorities assess their risk of modern slavery within the operations and supply chains and across other areas of work. But this specific licensing report makes recommendations for strengthening statutory guidance and explores the opportunities for licensing authorities and practitioners to utilize tools at their disposal to enhance local modern slavery responses. The report was compiled following an extensive period of evidence gathering from April to August 2022. So we conducted roundtables with over 30 stakeholders across 15 different local authorities, regulatory agencies such as the Environment Agency was involved, and the Gang Masters and Labour Abuse Authority, as well as other non-statutory partners. The inspiration from other areas of work, such as kind of current licensing frameworks across anti-social behaviour, crime, and the nighttime economy, we've drawn inspiration from various different good work and good practice that's been happening across licensing frameworks already. The project was funded by the Home Office through the Modern Slavery Prevention Fund, and we are very grateful to West Sussex Community Safety Team. I believe a few of them are on the call today for their active involvement in this project, and all of the professionals and consultants who contributed to the project to ensure that it was as accurate as possible. Just to say, before I begin talking through elements of the report, there is an opportunity to ask questions at the very end. So please do use the Q&A function to ask questions throughout this presentation, and we'll address each of those towards the end of the presentation. So if you click on the Q&A function, if you have a question, no matter what question it is, please do submit it, and I can address those at the end. So I thought it would be really useful to provide a brief summary or overview of modern slavery, as I'm aware that we have various professionals from various different backgrounds and departments on the call. So when we think about modern slavery, it really is an umbrella term that was adopted by the UK government in 2015 to coordinate the prevention and prosecution of 4 major crimes. And so that's slavery, human trafficking, forced labour, and domestic servitude. And all of these kind of incidents of modern slavery really include 2 basic elements. And the first is the deception or coercion of an individual. And second, that deception or coercion is for the purposes of exploitation. Just to say that this report focused mainly on labour exploitation, but appreciate that other forms of modern slavery can be present on licensed premises. So some examples of how labour exploitation can manifest. For example, victims can be forced or deceived into working and being controlled by a trafficker who gains financially. Victims might be working long hours without breaks, being housed in inadequate accommodation, having wages taken from them. Traffickers may use psychological tactics to control their victims. Victims might have their passports or other identification documents withheld from them. Some might be forced to pay their wages into someone else's bank account. Or victims might owe a debt to their trafficker because of recruitment costs, travel, accommodation, and really that debt is impossible to pay off. So it's important to note that modern slavery exists also on a continuum. At one end of the spectrum, you might have kind of minor labour market infringements all the way over to more dangerous forms of exploitation as well. There are some workers, employees, and subcontractor staff that are more vulnerable to exploitation. This could be due to their migration status, homelessness, any language barriers, if they're paid recruitment fees, and individuals who lack a social network. And really anyone can be a victim of modern slavery, but there are, certain things that might make workers more vulnerable to exploitation. And we think a little bit about the scale of modern slavery in the UK. By December 2022, just under 17,000 people were referred to the NRM. And when you think of the term NRM, it's the UK, it stands for National Referral Mechanism, and it is a system, or it's the UK system for identifying and supporting victims and survivors of modern slavery. So that's 16,938 victims were people identified as potential victims of modern slavery. They were referred into the scheme, and some of those given further support. However, it's estimated that there are over 100,000 victims of modern slavery in the UK, according to the Centre of Social Justice, meaning that really we're only identifying about 17% of total victims, which is problematic. And of those 16,938 victims identified by the National Referral Mechanism, 25% of them were UK nationals, 41% experienced labour exploitation, 14% experienced sexual exploitation, and an estimated 2 million workers are currently in vulnerable employment in the UK. So as you can see that the scale of modern slavery is incredibly massive. And we hope that licensed businesses, that kind of, the thousands of businesses that are across the UK can really work to mitigate it. So in terms of this report and how it can help, if you go onto the Shield Foundation website, you'll be able to access the full report. And for those that have already read it, and for those who haven't already read it, just to talk a little bit about the structure, the report is organized as follows. So section 1 explores how national licensing guidance can be strengthened to prevent modern slavery across the UK. So this section contains a list of recommendations for national government, and we're currently in talks with the Home Office on the possibility of updating that guidance. So that's specifically for national government. And then you have section 2 of the report, which looks at how local councils can update local licensing policies to directly address modern slavery. So this section contains a list of recommendations really for local council leadership and any officer or member of staff that is involved in updating local licensing policy. And then you have section 3. Section 3 focuses on the importance of awareness raising among licensed businesses and how to build the internal capacity of a local licensing teams via training and upskilling to practically address modern slavery in their daily operations. And so really this section contains a list of suggested activities for local licensing enforcement teams. And the third section of this report is really the focus of the webinars that we're going to have today, Thursday, and early next week. So like I said, section 3 focuses on how local licensing teams can confront modern slavery in their daily operations. And we have 3 recommendations that we're going to talk about in this particular webinar. But just to say about this section of the report is that it's split into 3 major themes. So the first is capacity building or training. Again, that's the focus of today's webinar. Thursday's webinar will look a little bit at raising awareness with the businesses that you're working with license holders. And then next week's webinar will focus on partnership working with law enforcement. So we've tried to split them across quite a few webinars so we can kind of dig a little bit deeper into each of the recommendations and how you might work on those within your organizations. So for today's webinar, we will look closely at recommendations 10, 11, and 12 of the licensing report. And like I said, each of these recommendations we hope will help you build kind of the internal capacity of your licensing teams to tackle modern slavery. So let's get into it. So recommendation 10 for licensing authorities and councils is to enhance the safeguarding training for licensing officers by incorporating modern slavery training that is specific to their role. So this recommendation suggests improving existing safeguarding training for licensing officers by adding specialized modern slavery related content, really that's tailored to the responsibilities of each kind of frontline licensing officer. And we all know that training plays a really crucial role in driving change and raising awareness, improving skills, fostering a proactive approach to combating modern slavery. So it's really important that the training that's delivered is tailored to each specific kind of licensing officer's role. Role-specific training ensures that individuals receive education and guidance directly relevant to their job functions, enhancing the effectiveness in addressing modern slavery, equipping individuals with bespoke skills and knowledge empowers them to identify and prevent and respond to modern slavery incidents that they might notice. And different roles within an organization, particularly frontline staff, face varying risks, and they're really in an ideal position to understand what indicators or to really recognize the indicators of modern slavery relevant to their role. But these indicators will vary depending on what the licensing officer's remit is and which licensing framework or team that they're a part of. So it's important that the training that that particular officer is given is relevant to the licensing framework and relevant to their daily operations. But it's also important in terms of operational staff and leadership. They also benefit from tailored training as it enables them really to make informed strategic decisions to combat modern slavery from a more strategic perspective. One of the contributors of the project said the following. They said, we need to give all officers who conduct inspections some awareness training. My team has had some, so now they know what to look out for and to ask when they carry out routine inspections. So during roundtable discussions as part of this project, it became evident that nearly 50% of the attendees recognize the importance of specialized modern slavery training for frontline officers and inspectors. Their work often involves direct interactions with businesses, establishments, and individuals, which make licensing officers that go out, specifically those that go out for inspections, really a valuable asset in the fight against modern slavery. And so we really wanted to focus on encouraging organizations to invest in their licensing officers and invest in specific tailored training for them as well. So in terms of a case study and an example of how this has worked in practice, licensing officers, or licensing authorities across Hertfordshire work closely with taxi drivers as per the statutory requirement to do so. While this is something that all authorities will be doing because of the statutory requirement to do so, we believe that the same thinking and approach used in taxi licensing cases should be extended to other licensed businesses, especially those in higher risk businesses. So especially those licensed sectors which are more susceptible to modern slavery and exploitation. So this is the main reason why we decided to include this case study in the report as an example of good practice. The Hertfordshire Modern Slavery Partnership Coordinator at the time organised modern slavery workshop and training for at least one representative of each of the 11 local authorities across Hertfordshire. The purpose of the workshop was to support licensing officers to better understand human trafficking and modern slavery. And the licensed officers who attended this workshop would be better equipped to directly support taxi drivers to report safeguarding concerns related to modern slavery, but other areas too, including kind of child sexual exploitation, county lines, and extremism. Knowledge levels were assessed before and after the workshop. Directly following the workshop, at least 5 local authority officers demonstrated an increase in knowledge of modern slavery and human trafficking. And more generally speaking, out of the organizations that contributed to this project, just over 60% had delivered or arranged to deliver a form of modern slavery training to their frontline licensing officers. In terms of what that training covered, it covered what is human trafficking, modern slavery, how it manifests across different authorities in Hertfordshire, and the licensing officer's specific responsibility when reporting or supporting the license holders that they were working with. It included information on tackling challenges to ensure better reporting of safeguarding concerns, the National Modern Slavery Helpline and how it works, how they can engage with it, recognizing and supporting taxi drivers or colleagues that had been exploited, and embedding human trafficking, modern slavery, and safeguarding elements within existing licensing frameworks. So it's quite an extensive piece of training. This workshop was completed a couple of years ago, and over 2 years, the coordinator at the time was able to record some longer term impact measurements. So she was able to evidence that establishing a positive relationship of trust with license holders is a direct outcome of providing specialized modern slavery training to licensing officers. Licensed officers, during their positive engagement and sharing of modern slavery knowledge with license holders, during that process, they were kind of able to empower license holders as well. And because of this, the license holders or the taxi drivers became, as we could say, mini influencers or advocates for anti-slavery efforts as they were conducting their businesses. The positive changes in the relationship with license holders and the increased awareness of modern slavery within the licensing department really can have a significant knock-on effect. It can lead to a more comprehensive and sustained effort across the local authority to tackle modern slavery with other various departments as you align your efforts and resources to combat the issue. So here's a bit of a snapshot of the impact measurements following the workshop. These are not all of them, but it's an example of kind of the immediate impact in terms of the actual training that the drivers received and how that kind of had a knock-on effect on the other authorities across Hertfordshire. But also this led to increased trust with license holders and improved operations across the organisation. So you can download the full report, the full evaluation report from She Foundation's website, and you can see kind of how similar authorities were following suit in the years to come. We have another case study for you. And kind of before I delve into this case study, the housing licensing framework has particular nuances and we think deserves its own investigation, as do other licensing frameworks. But we did want to include this case study in this report because I think it's an example of how training or investing in tailored specialized training for specific teams can have a significant impact, not only on the people that receive the training, but also on the wider organization. So it's an example, I think, of other positive outcomes that can result from training. So in this case, the Hampshire's Modern Slavery Coordinator delivered a modern slavery awareness session to Portsmouth City Council's housing regulation team in February 2022. The training was co-designed by Hampshire's Modern Slavery Coordinator, but she also had input from staff from HMRC and GLAA. The training included the following. So what exactly is modern slavery, how to spot the signs of exploitation, including specific case studies relevant to the housing department and within the remit of the officers' roles, national legislation, local procedures to follow if modern slavery has been identified. So what are the specific victim support pathways in Hampshire that the kind of housing officers should follow, and signposting to other learning resources that was also developed by the coordinator. Following the training, one of the noted positive outcomes included that a colleague from that specific licensing team now sits on the Modern Slavery Pursuit Group with all of their enforcement powers. So the presence of a licensing team member on this group with all of their enforcement powers amplifies the council's ability to take proactive measures against modern slavery and pursue investigations more effectively. So this example serves really as a tangible demonstration of how capacity building efforts can translate into practical actions and increase collaboration across various council departments, reinforcing the interconnectedness of efforts to combat modern slavery. I guess it also highlights the potential for cross-pollination of expertise and resources to achieve more comprehensive outcomes in the fight against modern slavery. And the last case study I would like to share with you was conducted by our partner in this project, so West Sussex County Council, their community safety team. They conducted a pilot between January and March 2022, where they delivered training on modern slavery to the fire safety team. So it's essential to explore this case study, as I think it demonstrates the broader impact of capacity building efforts. So one of the fire safety team's primary responsibility involves inspecting licensed premises to ensure compliance with business fire safety regulations. So the training they received was thoughtfully designed to align with their role and their responsibilities during those fire safety inspections. Notably, it incorporated information on the national agency powers as outlined by the National Enforcement Powers Guide. So they were able to share what agencies were involved in this visit and the relevant powers that they had to enforce. and including this aimed to encourage and facilitate partnership, engagement, and collaboration, especially during joint visits. The training also covered essential aspects related to modern slavery, so possible indicators of its presence at business premises. And so by educating the fire safety team about these indicators, they became better equipped to identify potential cases during their inspections. Furthermore, the training provided clear referral pathways specific to their local area or specific to that team to follow just in case they have identified a possible case of modern slavery. The impact of the training was positive. The fire safety team, having received the specialised modern slavery training, not only absorbed the information, but it also expressed a willingness to engage actively in efforts to combat modern slavery in their daily operations. Moreover, the impact extended beyond the fire safety team. An agreement was reached to conduct tailored training for the training standards team. So this development really signifies a ripple effect that awareness and capacity building can have and spread across the entire council. And ultimately, I guess this case study illustrates how targeted training can empower specific teams within a local authority to play an active role in addressing modern slavery. But I also believe highlights the potential for expanding this training to other relevant departments, creating a more comprehensive and interconnected response to this critical issue. And so those are the 3 case studies centered around recommendation 10. I want to quickly jump to recommendation 12 and then jump back to recommendation 11 shortly. So we've just been talking about the power of tailored training to not only equip licensing officers in their day-to-day role, but also the ripple effect it has on building the internal capacity of the organization due to more interconnected working, more partnership working, more working together across the organization. It's important, however, that the training is of a really high standard. And so recommendation 12 is to ensure quality assurance of modern slavery training is completed to make sure all modern slavery training or modern slavery related content or elements are accurate and of a good and high standard. Quality assurance is important to ensure training is of a good standard nationally and applied consistently across the UK, or as consistently as is possible. But during our research, the stakeholders for this report noted that training delivery differs in terms of who delivers the training, so what organization delivers it, the sourcing of that content, how long it is, how intense or how in-depth it is, and that inconsistency can become an issue. And just to say, as part of this recommendation, we did say that it's important for training to be regularly refreshed and for knowledge to be tested. And so one of the contributors for this project actually shared this framework with us. And that is a training framework on the identification, care and support of victims and survivors of modern slavery, which was developed by the Skills for Care and Development organization, St. Mary's University and the Bakita Centre. And this framework aims to establish a clear training standard for those involved in identifying, supporting and caring for people who have experienced modern slavery and human trafficking. So it's a really great framework to use if you are in the process of developing some training for your licensing officers and making it specific and tailored to those teams. This is a framework to, I guess, sit alongside that process to ensure that it's of a high quality and of a good standard. And ongoing quality assurance training that is refreshed regularly is essential for staff to feel empowered to proactively identify and prevent modern slavery. We all know that developing knowledge takes time. So if you're able to refresh that regularly and it kind of meets these standards and beyond, that's always a good thing. So that was that recommendation. I want to jump back now to recommendation 11. And this recommendation is to integrate information about modern slavery in the safeguarding training that members of licensing committees receive. And so, unfortunately, Meenal Sachdev is unable to join us as a guest speaker for this call, but she did record a video, which I would like to share with all of you, on the impacts that training councillors and those that sit on licensing committees can have on this issue, which I'll share with you now. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this works. Just gonna go next. And then hopefully if I press play, this would work.
Hi everyone, I'm really sorry I couldn't join you today. I really wanted to, but something came up. So my name is Meenal Sachdev, and I've been a local councillor at Hertsmere Borough Council since 2015. I was a member of the licensing committee until earlier this year, so that's for about 8 years. Separately to that, I was co-founder of Shiva Foundation over 10 years ago, which has basically been a vehicle, an organisation to tackle modern slavery and human trafficking and exploitation in all its forms by working with businesses, specifically hotel sector, and also local government, and more recently with national government. We coordinated for 5 years the Hearts of Modern Slavery Partnership, and through this partnership we noticed a really important opportunity available to us through licensing department to tackle this issue. So it's against this backdrop that this report has been created and why you're here. So the licensing department at any council, as you must know, uses sort of national licensing frameworks and navigates how to translate them locally. The Licensing Act, which is the focus for this report and this discussion, is just one of the licensing frameworks that we work with. One of our key responsibilities as those who work in this department is to set the local licensing policy across various activities, so be that alcohol, entertainment, shops, gambling, taxi services, which really allows us to set the overall strategic vision of what we want our area to look like. Similarly, we also have the power to make decisions on individual licenses once they come up for review. As members of this licensing committee, we possess both a sort of strategic oversight, a way to influence that, and operational capabilities that allow us to exert influence over business in our local area. So councillors that sit on the licensing committees wield substantial power, and this actually presents itself we're presented with numerous opportunities as a result of this. The challenge that we've been facing, and obviously the gap is closing, but still we're still facing, is that while most councillors may have some awareness of modern slavery, they may not actually have the tools to apply this knowledge effectively in their licence committee meetings and in their daily responsibilities. And because there's this noticeable gap when it comes to educating councils, this was something that we thought we would sort of intervene and try and close this gap. Consequently though, the responsibility of addressing modern slavery and incorporating it into the agenda of the licensing committees frequently is falling upon sort of the personal initiative and commitment of individual councillors and potentially officers as well. So this is what I did in Hertsmere several years ago now, and had very supportive fellow councillors and also officers to help along the way, without whom it wouldn't have been possible. A lack of knowledge of modern slavery within the councils, in my experience, can lead to missed opportunities to address modern slavery from a policy level, because a lot of these crimes happen locally. Also a negative impact on licensing teams, as they often rely on the support and guidance of committee members to implement and enforce licensing policies effectively. So when councillors aren't well informed, licensing teams may struggle to align their efforts with the sort of broader strategic objectives, leading to slightly disjointed and less effective anti-slavery measures. Also, a perceived lack, when they're not trained, there's a perceived lack of seriousness, as it may be assumed that local councils are not taking the issue of modern slavery and exploitation seriously, which can of course diminish trust and sort of harm the reputation, and also possibly on a larger scale discourage advocacy groups and stakeholders from engaging with local government on anti-slavery efforts. So it's a real missed opportunity if you think about the ripple effects. And finally, there's the missed opportunities of raising awareness amongst the public, especially licence applicants, who will likely end up encountering modern slavery while they're on their businesses. So there's a lot of missed opportunities if we don't take this forward, and if we don't make use of this specific tool and harness the power that we do have. Coming back, sort of wrapping up, so due to my personal interest in tackling modern slavery, and with the support of the Hertsmere Licensing Committee over several years, both officers and councillors, I was able to successfully advocate for a modern slavery section to be added to Hertsmere Borough Council's Statement of Licensing Policy when it came under review. And following this, because we did this successfully, we were able to then influence other councils within Hertfordshire, so there's 9 other district councils under Hertfordshire, to adopt similar provisions. And they did so successfully as well. So by investing in the education and the training of licensing committees, members, and local councillors and officers, local councils can expect to see long-term impact in 4 ways. Firstly, the addition of a modern slavery section within the Statement of Licensing Policy represents a significant step in building a more comprehensive and effective policy framework for combating modern slavery. The long-term impact of this ensures that modern slavery considerations are firmly embedded in the Council's licensing procedures, creating a long-term foundation for addressing exploitation in general. So there's a real long-term vision here behind, in terms of the purpose of doing this. Secondly, it fosters a culture of awareness and commitment that extends beyond the initial policy change. So that's what I mean by ripple effects. Also, because of training and education, there's improved accountability and oversight, and businesses are positively engaged in the conversation, which is really vital and important. And finally, the local authority's reputation is enhanced, which is always a good thing. So today, looking ahead, I think investing in the education and training of licensing committees members specifically, and local councillors in general, is a very sustainable commitment when it comes to eradicating modern slavery and helping victims of this crime in the UK. The knowledge gained through this will enhance our ability to hold licence holders accountable for their actions. It'll also make our licensing committees more effective in shaping local policies that reflect our values and our strategic objectives as local councils. Just want to end by saying that I would like to express my gratitude to the Shiva Foundation team for all their hard work, and for the support of the licensing committee in Hertsmere for incorporating modern slavery into their policies and practices, and also helping us advocate for it at a Hertfordshire level. I'd also like to thank Councillor Maurice Bright, who is currently the leader of the Conservative group, but who was leader of the council at the time, and also the commitment of our fellow councillors for the support they provided me during this process. And finally, I want to express my deep appreciation for the remarkable work and unwavering dedication exhibited by local authority staff across the UK. Beyond recognising your outstanding contributions, I urge any representatives today from other local councils and authorities attending this webinar to recognise that your licensing committees, or if you're affiliated with them, can play a really vital role and can help you take those positive steps that are really vital and necessary to prevent exploitation and modern slavery in your respective areas. So thank you for listening. Sorry again I couldn't be there, and I hope you have a wonderful session. Bye.
Okay, so hopefully that gave you a bit of an idea on how empowering local licensing committees can really support the efforts of licensing teams who are working every day in this role as well. So we, as part of that section of the report, we do talk a bit more fully about that as well. So we're kind of at the end of the information section of the first webinar, talking about 3 recommendations of the final report. Thursday's webinar will look at 3 more recommendations, but that specifically is around raising awareness amongst the licensing holders and how teams can play a role in empowering them as well. I do want to now open the floor for a few questions. So I'm just going to check in the chat to see what these questions are. So the first question is, where can I find training resources? So I appreciate this webinar actually isn't the training session, but to tell you why it's important to train your teams. What I will say is that there are a plethora of resources online. So I'm sure many of you would know this, but obviously the GL AA has great resources, you know, specifically on kind of training teams. So there will be a little bit of work of tailoring that towards your licensing teams, but there are generally, they're a great hub to go to access the resources. The Selma of the LGA, they have a guide for licensing teams and tackling modern slavery as well. So again, another great place to go. And then there'll be an additional work there of tailoring that training specifically, or those resources specifically for your team. I would like to say, obviously, that Shield Foundation, we do have a consultancy limb as well. So if you want bespoke training for your teams that's tailored to your licensing teams, kind of on the specifically for your teams, we can do that. We can offer for you, we can offer that to you as well. So feel free to scan the QR code on the screen. Hopefully that gives you an overview of an answer, and we can also link those resources in the follow-up emails that we send to this webinar as well. And then the second question I have here is, who do we go to regarding the implementation of training for staff and councillors? I really think that depends on your organisation. So it's really important to get senior management buy-in. So that the role of, like I said, the licensing committee members is really important, but also management within the organisation. We're not going to really talk about the update to guidance within this webinar, or any of these webinars specifically, but the first section of the report does talk about how important it is to have guidance at a national level, which talks about modern slavery and how that can kind of trickle down to local implementation on the ground. So yeah, important at a national level, but also it's important to, share this with your senior management team so they're also involved in the conversation, and then it's easier to kind of get that support from them to implement training locally as well. I'm just going to check the chat to see if there are any additional questions here. Okay. So the scale of modern slavery is high and increasing, with approximately 17,000 victims identified. Do we have an indication of the level of action and enforcement against people and organizations who are perpetrators of this? Interested to hear locally and the national picture. So I think there are various agencies, and everyone else on this call, feel free to weigh in the chat too. But there are various agencies, various efforts, not only, I guess, in the licensing sector, but across local authorities to tackle this problem at a local level. I mean, like I said at the very beginning of the webinar, we released a self-assessment scorecard, which allowed local authorities across the UK to I guess assess their own risk of modern slavery and to talk about a few things that they've done within their local authorities to understand where they sit. And I've had the pleasure of reading a few of those self-assessment I guess results that have come in, and seen that local authorities are doing really great work. There's always still place for that to, room for that to improve, but really doing really great work across the UK to tackle it at a local level. I think there's a question on nationally on the landscape of modern slavery nationally, which is a different conversation. But yeah, feel free to please look at kind of the first section of the report, which talks a little bit about what kind of is existing for licensing teams kind of nationally to tackle that crime as well. Great, so I'm just going to give everyone just a few more minutes or seconds, if you do have any follow-up questions to ask about these specific 3 recommendations, please do put them in the QR, the question and answer forum now. And it's good to see some great people on the call as well. Okay, so if there are no more further questions, the next webinar, like I said, is on Thursday. The full report, all 3 sections are available on the website, so please do download that. And Thursday section, the focus will be on how can, I guess, licensing teams and authorities empower individuals to, or individual license holders to, understand that modern slavery is happening around them and work to mitigate it as well. And then next week, really excitingly, we do have the final webinar on partnership working with law enforcement, and we have a partner on the call who worked really input into this resource and has some great kind of live case studies to share with you, so please do attend that webinar too. But thank you everyone, and I hope you have a lovely afternoon.